Sometimes, life tests the strongest souls, not with storms, but with silence. And in that silence, some hearts break, while others learn to shine. This is the story of Ruth, a woman with hands that never rested, and a heart that carried more pain than most could bear. She lived in the south side of Chicago, a small broken house with a leaking roof, 2 children, both innocent, both hungry for dreams, and a husband, Marcus, once a proud man, now trapped in a wheelchair after a factory accident. Ruth worked wherever she could, cleaning homes, washing dishes, mopping floors until her palms burned. Yet every night, she came home with a tired smile for the little ones who waited by the window. But the truth? Ruth was breaking inside. She had debts, no savings, no one to lean on. And every morning, when she looked at her husband, she saw the guilt in his eyes. He wanted to help, but his legs no longer listened. Sometimes she'd walk to the bus stop before dawn and whisper a small prayer, "Lord, just one good day, please." But days kept getting harder. One morning, the woman she worked for, Mrs. Landon, slammed the door before Ruth could even speak. "Mrs. Landon, I told you not to be late again. I don't need you anymore." That moment, Ruth stood frozen. Her world went quiet. Her only job, gone. No money for rent, no food for the week. She walked miles that day, from house to house, asking for work. Most people turned her away. Some didn't even open the door. The sun began to set, and her feet ached. She sat on a park bench, hands trembling, watching the lights flicker across the city. Each one, a home, warm, alive, and she, nowhere to go. That's when an old man wearing a long brown coat stopped near her. He looked at her. Really looked, not like the others did. "Old man. Rough day, huh?" "Ruth," soft voice. "You could say that." Old man. "Well, keep your chin up, miss. You never know who's watching." He walks away. She didn't know what he meant, but something in his voice stayed with her, a strange warmth in a cold city. That night, when she returned home, her children ran to her, hugging her, legs asking, "Mama, did you bring dinner?" She swallowed her tears, smiled and said softly, "Tomorrow, baby. Tomorrow." She sat beside Marcus, who stared at the floor. He didn't ask. He already knew. And in that silence, 2 broken souls held on to hope, the only thing they had left. But fate wasn't done with Ruth yet, because sometimes, when the world turns its back on you, a miracle begins to walk your way. Ruth didn't sleep that night. She sat near the small window, watching the city lights fade into the dark. Her children were asleep beside her, their little hands clutching her worn-out apron. And she kept thinking, how much longer could she keep them safe? The next morning she left home early again. Her shoes were old, her coat thin, but her hope still alive somewhere deep inside. She walked to the nearby church, not to pray, but just to sit. It was quiet there, and peaceful. While she was sitting, a man entered, tall, middle-aged, with kind eyes. He noticed her instantly, as if he had been expecting her. He smiled softly and said, "You look like you've been carrying the whole world on your shoulders." Ruth tried to smile back. "Just trying to find work, sir. Anything. Cleaning, washing, I can do it." The man looked thoughtful for a moment. "My name's Mr. Daniels," he said. "I run a small cafe 2 blocks away. If you're willing to work hard, I could use someone like you." For a second, Ruth couldn't breathe. After so many doors shut in her face, this one finally opened. She nodded quickly, her eyes shining. "Yes, sir. I'll do my best." That day, for the first time in months, Ruth went home with a smile. She hugged her children, kissed Marcus on the forehead, and told him she had found a job. He smiled, weakly, the kind of smile that carried both relief and sadness. "I knew you'd find a way," he said. "You always do." Days turned into weeks. Ruth worked long hours at the cafe, cleaning tables, serving coffee, and sometimes baking pies when the cook was away. She never complained. Even when her back hurt, she kept moving. Her laughter began to return, soft, shy, but real. Mr. Daniels often watched her quietly. He noticed how she spoke kindly to every customer, how she wrapped leftover food for the homeless kids outside, how she never took more than she needed. One evening, when the cafe was closing, he called her over. "You know," he said, "I've met many people, Ruth, but I've never seen anyone work with so much heart." She looked down, embarrassed. "I just try to do what I can, sir." He smiled. "You do more than that. Listen, there's a small apartment above the cafe. It's empty. If you'd like, you and your family can move in, rent-free, at least until you get back on your feet." Ruth froze. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. Really seen. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You already did," he replied gently, "by not giving up." That night, Ruth walked home under the streetlights, the cold air brushing her face, but her heart, warm, alive again. She looked at the sky and whispered, "Thank you for not forgetting me." And when she reached home, her children ran into her arms, laughing, and Marcus, sitting in his chair, looked at her like she was made of light. Ruth smiled through her tears. Maybe life wasn't fair, but somehow, somewhere, grace had found her. The woman who once had nothing was finally standing at the door of a new beginning. Months passed. Ruth and her family moved into the small apartment above the cafe. It wasn't big or fancy, but to her, it was heaven. The children had their own corner to sleep in, and for the first time in years, she didn't worry about the rain leaking through the roof. Every morning she woke up before sunrise, made breakfast for her kids, helped Marcus into his chair, and then went downstairs to open the cafe. Her hands still ached, her back still hurt, but every ache now meant purpose. Mr. Daniels became like family. He treated her children with kindness and often told her, "You remind me of my late wife, strong, stubborn, and full of faith." Ruth would laugh quietly. It felt strange to laugh again, but she was learning how. With time, business grew. Customers came not just for coffee, but because Ruth's presence made the place feel warm, alive. Her smile became the cafe's secret ingredient. One evening, as she was cleaning a table, a young woman walked in, tired, nervous, the same way Ruth once was. She looked around and whispered, "Ma'am, are you hiring?" Ruth saw herself in that face, the fear, the exhaustion, the tiny spark of hope. Without a second thought, she said, "Come tomorrow morning. We'll find something for you." That night, when Ruth closed the cafe, she stood at the window, watching the city lights again. The same lights that once made her feel so small. But tonight, she felt something different. She felt strong. She turned to Marcus, who sat beside her smiling. "Do you remember the day we thought we had lost everything?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "And now look at us," she said softly. "Maybe sometimes you have to fall, so you can learn where the light really comes from." Her children were asleep in the next room, their faces peaceful, their future brighter than ever. Ruth looked at her hands, the same hands that once trembled in despair, and smiled. They weren't just hands that cleaned or struggled. They were hands that built, healed, and gave. She whispered to herself. The silent hands. They were never weak. They were waiting to rise. And in that small cafe, in the heart of a city that once ignored her, a woman who had nothing became a symbol of quiet strength, proof that kindness, faith, and hard work can turn even the darkest nights into morning.